Okay, so we can begin now. This is going to be the review of The Legend of Zelda manga adaptation of The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. So, the Minish Cap was a game released for the Game Boy Advance. It's a relatively short game. It only has a few dungeons. So, as a format, it's a relatively good. Jesus Christ! I'm sorry, my English is being destroyed today. It can be transformed into a manga format relatively easily. It works quite well just because it's short. There's not that many dungeons, and one big feature is that Link has a companion here. So if we remember, for example, in Oracle of Ages and Seasons, there were pretty much no dungeons in that game. In that manga, Link never went to visit a dungeon, and it makes sense because honestly, most of the game, if you play the actual games, most of the game is just dungeons. You know, the dungeons are the biggest difficulties, and they are the biggest part of the time that you are going to be spending. Minish Cap works a lot better here because there's fewer dungeons. They are very diverse as well, and we have this companion named Eslo, so he's like a bird, but also a hat. He is a very great character, funny character, so he's pretty cool. Minish Cap is one of my favorite Zelda games. It's the first Zelda game that I ever played, and I remember like from the first time playing it, I absolutely fell in love with it. It's honestly a beautiful game. They really did a good job with it. So the main shtick of, I suppose we can go through the story a little bit. Not to go into the spoilers too much, I suppose. So the book starts very similar to what the game does. We have basically establish what the Minish are, or the Picori as well. So the Minish are these little creatures, as the game says, Minish Cap. The Minish are these little creatures. They are thumb-sized creatures. They live everywhere in your house, like I can't say in English again, like in your house everywhere. So you probably have him somewhere as well in your own house, and they basically use like you look like a stamp. For us, it's a little stamp, but for the Minish, it's a picture, and they live like that. Now the cool thing is that the Minish actually explain a lot of Legend of Zelda stuff. So, for example, in Legend of Zelda, you can find rupees everywhere by cutting grass. So in Minish Cap, they actually explain it that you can find rupees because the Minish put them in grass. So that's quite interesting. The Minish also seem to be in control of the world's currency as well, I suppose. But yeah, you see them. They're creatures like this living everywhere, and they also do stuff when you're not watching. So, like for example, this was in the video game, so it's pretty cool that they brought it into the manga. It's only 2 pictures, but if you know the video game, you're going to understand this reference, and it's a lot of fun. So this guy he's a shoemaker, and when he falls asleep, the Minish make shoes instead of him, and he always wakes up, and it's like, wow, I made the shoe, and he feels like he has a special talent of making shoes when he's asleep. But in reality, the Minish are doing it. Okay, whatever. So the game starts pretty much the same. Actually, not pretty much the same. It's a little bit different. But they do establish that he's living with his grandfather, who's a smith, and he's helping him work, and all of that. Now, they also establish that he's practicing sword fighting, which is a little bit different, but if you think about it, it makes sense. If we're going to send Link on an adventure, it makes sense to establish that he has some practice with a sword. Now, another interesting thing is that here we have our main villain, Vati. He actually meets him earlier than he should in the story. And I think that it's a welcome change because I suppose it gives us some more character development and such. He also meets Princess Zelda. So another strength of the Minish Cap, if we talk about a game that could be adapted into a manga, is that while Princess Zelda isn't that much of a character, she is a little bit more of a character than, for example, in Link to the Past, or even Oracle of Ages and Seasons, where she was basically not present at all. Here she's established as, Happy, Link's childhood friend who runs away from the castle even though she's not supposed to be. She breaks the rules a little bit, and so on and so on. It's interesting, to establish some connection between them. So at least like Link is saving his friend and not literally just some abstract princess that he doesn't know about. You know, here we have stuff from the video game. Honestly, they really captured some of the most iconic moments from the video game, like going to the fair and some other ones as well. Here we have then the main villain Vati. You know, it's basically story stuff. I don't need to talk about it too much. Maybe I would just like to mention how well they captured this moment. So when the villain Vati defeats all of the enemy soldiers, Zelda takes up a very brave stand against him, and I think they captured this moment very well here in manga format. Like, this look carries a lot of emotions with it. It's a pretty good job, and Link as well, doing his heroic role. Zelda gets turned to stone and Link has to save her. One thing that I would mention is that she kinda looks like she's turned to chocolate and not stone, but that's it, I suppose. Another interesting thing that is attributed to Minish Cap is that they sort of explain why a little kid Link would actually be appropriate for going on a quest, because the Minish can only be apparently seen by children and Link is a child. In this case, it actually makes sense to rely on a child, as opposed to any other game where, you know, you ask yourself, aren't there any knights who are suited to do this? You know, he goes inside the Minish woods looking for the Minish. Of course, he can't find anything, and he bops up into this, our main character, Vati. I mean, Jesus, not Vati. Our main companion, Eslo. It's again, they captured the moment from the video game perfectly. He's being attacked by these two Octoroks, and Link saves him. And another moment here, when Eslo tricks Link to basically jump on his head. It's been captured as well perfectly, just like it was in the game. It's like, hey Link, I have something to tell you, a secret. And like Link comes close and then bump, he jumps right on his head. Maybe if I mention is for some reason, Link thinks that Eslo is a leprechaun. Whatever, like there's some cartoony emotions with Eslo as well. Eslo is a really great companion. He's probably one of the best from the Legend of Zelda series. He's an interesting guy, like a bird that just sits on your head and makes quirky remarks all the time. Eslo helps Link to shrink on Minish size, and that basically helps him to find the Minish. Here we have another very iconic moment from the video game where he comes to the Minish village. I suppose we don't need to go into the story too much, but I would like to mention is, look, for example, when Link goes to the dungeon, it's represented here. Even the item that he finds is represented and how he uses it. Most of the main items are represented like that. And again, it works really well because there aren't that many dungeons in this game. Trying to do the same, for example, in Link to the Past would be much harder because there's so many items. They also changed some things a little bit, like here for example he uses a bird that allows him to travel from dungeon to dungeon. That never happened in the original game, but for the manga it makes sense, so it can advance the story a little bit faster. So here we have other dungeons being shown as well. One great moment from the manga, from the video game here, is when Link uses this minecart and to not, you know, and gets very dissed out by it. It's shown here in the manga really well, just what we would want. Here we have another great moment when Link uses Eslo to fly over the manga, and of course the cane of Paki that he finds, very faithfully adopted into the manga format. It does a very good job here, as well as like a lot of very small things. For example, when Link meets a cat. You know, this isn't that important, but it shows that the authors Akira Himekawa really had a lot of affection and love for the video game. Like for example, when he meets the cat attacks him, while the dog on the other side is shown to be friendly, which is the same as it was in the video game. In the video game, most of the cats were hostile to Minish-sized Link, and while the dogs were friendly to him. Here is another quite funny moment that has been invented by Akira Himekawa. That video game never went into it. So when Link goes inside this girl's house, which by the way is also present in the video game, he takes advantage of his Minish powers to pick under her skirt, which I suppose is supposed to be sort of a comedic moment. And Aslo adds a smarky remark, like, what kind of a hero does that? Well, of course, Link pays quite a heavy price for his perversion. He almost gets stomped, but he doesn't. It seems that it was worth it to him. It's quite funny that they added something like this. This is such an incredibly strong cultural difference. You would never expect a moment like that in a child's comic book, like in the West, for the targeted demographic, but I suppose like Japan is a little bit more chill as far as that kind of stuff goes. Here we have another great moment that's represented perfectly, like when Link visits this guy in the library. We have here the guy that has the house inside the book, just like it was in the video game, and it's beautiful. It's quite perfect. I think that's about all that I wanted to say. Like, seriously, pretty much all the dungeons are featured at least a little bit, which, like, great kudos to that. There's also like some small changes, like this encounter with this fairy that never happened, and Vati appears, which he did in the video game, but in a different way. You know, they did make some changes, but I can't complain about it too much. It really doesn't hurt all that bad. Here we have Aslo's backstory. I suppose that we don't need to spoil it, and even like game mechanics like kinstones are being represented. Like putting these kinstones together, it's also another great feature that's very unique to the Minish Cap. So when you walk around, you find these little pieces, and when you connect two of them together, something happens. Like a new enemy appears, or you might find a heart container, or something might change. You might unlock new content, and it's a beautiful way of giving us replay value, and not only replay value, like side questing and stuff like that. And it's cool that they represented it in a manga, even if it's short. But it's cool that it's here because it really is a big part of the video game. Here we have like the graveyard scene, for example. Like that was another very iconic moment from the Minish Cap. The graveyard level was really cool. It had a really great scary atmosphere. I don't want to go into the story too much. I don't really think that there's a need. It really follows the story. It follows the story from the video game very closely, so I really can't complain here too much. Maybe if we go into some spoilers at the end. We have the battle with Vati here, being represented very well. His forms are represented very, very, very faithfully. Now, one big difference here is that Vati as a character, he is given somehow more depth. Well, Vati also, I suppose he somehow has depth in the original. Here he has a little bit, they gave him a little bit more depth compared to the video game. The biggest difference is that when Vati gets defeated, he actually turns back into his Minish form, as well as Aslo does, since he is also a Minish. Woohoo, spoilers, I warned you. And he actually is regretful. He genuinely feels bad to what he did. He explained why he did what he did. He sort of has a reason for doing it. He wanted to improve himself. He wanted more power, and the power that he got tempted him, and so on and so on. While, of course, we already talked about the Four Swords, Vati is also the bad guy in the Four Swords. This isn't Four Swords. We know that Vati is supposed to be present in the Four Swords, and he's a villain there, so it doesn't make sense with the story continuity, because Minish Cap is sort of supposed to be the prequel to the Four Swords, even though there are some differences. Like, a lot of stuff are genuinely the same, they work in the timeline quite well, but I still think, like, if we talk about this, it's interesting that the authors thought of it as a standalone, even though it's the same Vati and it's the same Link. They changed it a little bit. Maybe he becomes evil again, that would also somehow work. Maybe he just pretended to be evil, because in the video game Vati just disappears and we don't know where he is. But of course he returns back in Four Swords, and in Four Swords there's pretty much no story and no character whatsoever. So I like this ending quite a lot. It's a lot of fun. We also get some bonus comics as well, bonus manga that, interestingly enough, they actually give Vati some more character depth. actually some history, but they're also fun and comedic, and they're a lot of fun. In the end, we get the preview to what's next, and another cool thing that I would like to mention, we have a personal note from the authors, Hakira Himekawa. They say that the world of the Minish Cap may be small, but the deeper you go into it, the more fun it becomes. I completed the figure, but no matter what I do, I can't find the last kinstone. If Picture really existed, I'd wish for them to write my script while I sleep. LOL. Like, this is really great because it shows that the authors genuinely played the game. If they completed all of the figures, that's a very good job because it takes a lot of work to do it. Like, the reason why I'm saying this is because if we look at a lot of Western adaptations, you know, you genuinely don't get the feeling that the authors that made it, like, you know, when they make a video game movie or a movie based on a book, you genuinely don't have the feeling that the guy doing it loved the book or, you know, even understood it. Did he even read it? You ask yourself at some point. You know, maybe not. Like, here you really see that the authors had love and affection for the video game, which is very, you know, it's very important. You have to treat art like art. You can't treat art like it's a business transaction, because it sucks if you do it. Interestingly enough, like, another thing that I might mention is they say they can't find the last kinstone. There's actually a glitch that prevents you from getting one kinstone, so I really hope they weren't stuck like that. Yeah, that's pretty much all that I had to say. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.